Hey, what's up, guys? Let me zoom in a bit here. Good enough. So, as an engineer, when you do a mix for an artist who's under a major label, and in this case specifically, the artist is under Universal Music, or that umbrella. Shout out to my guy Lavish, by the way. Go check him out. He's insanely talented. But you go to a page like this when you're done and have gotten approval on the mix. Let's dive deeper into this. What's up, guys? Ty Dinelli from Risk Engineering Music, checking in with you. Hope all is well today. Right off the bat, I want to say if you guys are getting some good information from this channel, just hit that subscribe button. Do me the favor. I'd really appreciate it. Throw me a comment, shoot me a like, whatever. Anything I appreciate. Anyways, like I was saying in that little intro video, we're going to be talking about kind of major labels today as an engineer. I get a question asked a lot from people just on my social media. And, well, a couple questions kind of pertaining to this. But one of them is, Ty, how do you get these major label placements? How can I get these placements? How do I get the connections with major labels? That kind of thing. And the other question is, what do you get with the major labels that you don't get with independent artists? Or vice versa? So, we're going to get into all that today. I think this is a super important question, and it's something that I haven't seen a lot of people touch on in the industry as engineers, coming from our point of view. So I want to give you guys the experience and the knowledge that I have working with major labels and opposed to working with just independent artists or independent labels. So let's dive into it. So the first question, how do you get major label placements? Or how have I got them? And that's not exactly I wish I could tell you guys like, hey, if you just do this, you'll automatically get placements. That's not really how it works. Well, not for me anyways. I can't speak for anybody else, but for me, any major label placement that I've had in my career has come through either connections that I've made personally or people that are around in my general circle, whether that's business related people or friends, or in my situation, I have some friends that I've kind of come up with that are in the industry as well, and we all kind of are a collective, if you want to call it. So we're all kind of looking out for each other, but that came from me just kind of putting myself around the right people. So I think part of it starts with that, is putting yourself around the right people that A, you can benefit from, but B, they can also benefit from you. It's got to be a give and take kind of thing. You can't just take all the time and not expect to give. You got to kind of have that mutual relationship when it comes to these kind of partnerships, friendships, whatever you want to call them. But it's super important to have that. So a lot of my stuff has come from that. And I should even say, I don't have a lot of major label placements. I really don't. Most of the work that I do currently and leading up to this point in my career has been through independent labels or just independent artists in general. The majority of money that I make to this day comes from independent artists and independent labels, not from big major placements. So as I was saying, putting yourself around the right people is important. Secondly, building with artists who you actually think have potential, I think is super important as well. There's some artists that I regretfully could say from back in the day, earlier on in my career, who have become bigger to this day. I don't want to say any names necessarily right now, but they're definitely, if not A-list artists, B-list kind of thing that I worked with in the past. And, you know, maybe back then I didn't see it, or I didn't see the potential at the time, so I didn't invest, you know, my time or my skills into them. But if you do see that in somebody, I recommend like just going in on them, putting your services to them at either a fraction of the cost or just working with them for free and really kind of building that artist up and building with them. can be super beneficial. Because if you have that kind of belief in them to a point where you say, look, I'm gonna just work for free for this guy, like that's how much I believe in him, then you should think that somebody else would see that too. And then further down the line, that person could sign a major deal. You never know. And then hopefully, if you've shown your loyalty to that artist, then they'll probably show it back and bring you along with them when they go to a major label. So that's another way to look at things, is just building with artists from the start that you really believe in and think they have potential to go right to the top. And lastly, not that I've really done this necessarily, but it couldn't hurt to just shoot some emails out. I'm sure you could scour Facebook or Instagram or Twitter and find some kind of people that are already in major label positions. They don't have to be right at the top of the chain, but they can be further down and you can kind of get your way through them. You can offer your services, and you never know. Sometimes you just get lucky if you message the right person at the right time and they're looking for someone. So you could also try that. And then the next question I usually get from people relating to this is kind of what's the difference between working with a major and just an independent artist? And I would say there's a few differences. One, yes, the money is better when you're working with a major because they've got money at the end of the day. So, and that most times in most situations that I've been with a major label where I've got a placement, I tell them a number and they don't bat an eye. There's no, oh, well, we can get this person to do it cheaper, or can you do it for this price? There's no back and forth like that. You'll tend to get that a lot with independent artists because, I mean, independent artists just don't have a lot of money and they're sinking their money into videos and promoting and marketing and all that kind of stuff. So there's a little more back and forth with independent artists, especially earlier on in your career. But with labels, they tend to just, whatever your price is, no problem. And with major labels, I always charge more. And it's not to just gouge them because they are a major label and they have money. It's typically because there's more work involved when you're dealing with them. When you're dealing with an independent artist, you kind of give them the song, they might have a few revisions, you send it back to them, they ask for the wave. That's pretty much it, you're good to go. Maybe they want a DJ package, something like that. But with major labels, they want a hell of a lot more. So what they want, and what I was showing you earlier, that website, is kind of your place to go when you're done and you're ready to hand in the deliverables. What are deliverables, you might ask? Deliverables with major labels are a number of things, actually. And let me even pull this up so I don't get it wrong. So I'll give you kind of a list of exactly what they want. Okay, so typically labels will want multi-track DAW session, so your Pro Tools session, Logic session, whatever. They'll want the audio files folder, anything kind of that is in the session itself. They'll want the main mix, they'll want the clean mix, they'll want the performance version, the TV version. They'll want the acapella, clean and dirty. They'll want the instrumental. And then on top of that, they'll want everything stemmed out. A lot of times they'll want dry stems from the session, so you have to sit there and one by one bounce down every single session, or every single stem that's in that session, or every track in that session, I should say. Got to do it dry, and then you've got to do it wet with all the effects on it. So you're sitting there just bouncing things one by one by one by one by one, and you've got to label everything a certain way. There's a format of how they want things labeled and coded and all that kind of thing. So you're sitting there for hours sometimes just getting these deliverables together, which can be, you know, time consuming. So that's why I typically end up charging more for that kind of thing. I'll have my rates, whatever I say my rate is, I'll take a look at it and decide how much I want to charge. And then typically I'll also throw anywhere from $200 to $400 on top of that, depending on how big I know the session is and how long it's going to take me to actually sit there and bounce down the files and get all these deliverables together. So there is more money potentially with major labels than opposed to independent artists, but just know that you are putting in more time compared to working with independent artists, typically. The other thing you guys should know is when you work with an independent artist, I don't know, everyone has got their own kind of method, and I know there's websites now like Engineers you can go on that make payments quite easy to deal with between both parties, you and the artist. But I personally have not gone the Engineers route, even though I'm on there and I was an early onboarder for that platform. I don't necessarily use it, and I'm gonna explain that in a whole nother video. And it's nothing that I have against it whatsoever. I love it. I think it's a brilliant website and everything, but we'll get to that another time. But an independent engineer working with an independent artist, depending on how you work, if you're like me personally, I get money up front before I send out the final mix. So if somebody doesn't pay me up front, I say, no problem, I can do half up front and then half when I get the song finished. But I still get that final payment before I even send the mix out to them. And you have to build that trust with your clientele. With me, again, 11 years in the game now, my clients they trust me. And if somebody comes to me for the first time and hasn't worked with me, chances are they've heard about me from somebody else and they've given me a good recommendation. So that person already, right off the bat, has that trust for me, so they're okay with either paying up front or paying half up front, whatever the case may be. But in those circumstances, if you are like me and you get money up front, you don't have to worry about anything. With major labels, not necessarily that you have to worry about getting paid, but it takes a long time sometimes. For whatever reason, that's the way major labels operate. They kind of pay things out. I don't even know. It's ridiculous. And that's another reason why Engineers is great, because they kind of set a date on when you're actually going to get paid. But anyways, yeah, working with major labels, if you don't know, can be a time-consuming and frustrating process, because you'll send everything in, the mix will be approved, you'll send in the deliverables, and you're kind of like, okay, well, shouldn't I be paid now? Where's my compensation? And it's not going to come. It's just not. It usually takes, on average, I'd say at least a couple months usually. Sometimes it's been a little quicker than that for me. Sometimes it's been a little longer. It really depends on the label. Some are a little better than others, but typically don't expect it any sooner than a month. That's just how it is. So it can be annoying sometimes, but it's one of those things you just kind of have to expect and deal with. It will come, and it is more than what you'll make typically when you're opposed to working with an independent artist, but just be ready to wait on it. If you do get one of those placements and you're saying, hey, that's money I'm ready to spend right now, don't go out and buy some gear thinking that money is going to come in the next day after you send in the deliverables, because it's not. I guarantee you it's not. So just keep that in mind as well. And then really the other question is like, what do I personally prefer? I get that a lot. Do I prefer working with the majors or do I prefer working with the independent artists? It's a toss-up, because again, you can kind of make more with the majors, but sometimes there's a lot more headaches. You're dealing with a lot more people. The artists are, well, not always, but they can be a little pickier. Well, not even the artists. The whole collective can be a little pickier, because you're dealing with the artist. You're dealing with producers. They've got to clear the mix. You're dealing with management. They've got to clear the mix. You're dealing with A&Rs. They've got to clear it. You're dealing with the label people. So there's a lot of people that have to clear the mix to give you the approval. So sometimes you can go through a lot of revisions. Sometimes it's a pretty easy process, especially if you just nail it and the artist is happy first and foremost. They're the most important person to please, right? So if they're happy with it, it usually is a quicker process. So a lot more people to please. There can be a lot more back and forth. And especially with the deliverables, once you hand something in, there might be, maybe you labeled something wrong, maybe there's something else they need. So there's a little more back and forth on that. And like I said, it might be a while before you get paid. So there's pros and cons to each. Whereas working with independent artists, and again, that's the majority of people that I work with, I typically don't have any issues working with independent artists. I send them the mix. They might give me a couple revisions back, something like that. It's usually nothing too crazy, especially at this point in my career. I usually try to get on the same page with people. And if somebody gives me a whole page of revisions, It's probably because we weren't on the same page necessarily. So I like to try to jump on that before even going into it with an artist so that we don't have to go back and forth on a million revisions. There might be one or two minor things, but I know the vision that the artist is trying to go for. And most times, I'm not even trying to be cocky, but I can just nail that. So again, pros and cons to each, but I hope that answers a few questions and just gives some insight into labels and just independent artists. If there's any questions you guys have about anything, drop a comment. It'll help me and I'll help you. So it's a win-win for both of us. So that's all for today, guys. Take care.